pregnant wife was thrown out by her billionaire husband. Then she returned with a secret that ruined him. In a world where love and betrayal often share the same bed, few stories captivate the heart and chill the bone like the saga of Sarah Campbell and her powerful husband, Daniel Rutherford. She was a devoted wife and soon-to-be mother, believing her future shone bright under Daniel's dazzling millionaire lifestyle. But in one shocking twist, Sarah found herself tossed onto the cold streets, abandoned by the very man she trusted with her life. Little did Daniel know that the child she carried and the secret she uncovered would unleash a storm of retribution. Witness the explosive rise and fall of an empire, fueled by the unwavering spirit of a woman scorned. Sarah Campbell was not a woman of extravagant means before she met Daniel Rutherford. Hailing from a humble suburb in Pennsylvania, she had been raised by her grandmother, an iron-willed lady named Beatrice Sullivan, who taught Sarah the importance of resilience. Sarah learned at an early age that life seldom handed out privileges without demanding a price. Despite limited resources, she managed to attend a decent college, major in business administration, and land herself an entry-level position at Rutherford Holdings. Rutherford Holdings had been a name whispered in the corridors of power, associated with large-scale investments in real estate, technology startups, and international trade. The face behind it all was Daniel Rutherford, a charming, sharp-minded man with an uncanny ability to manipulate markets and, in some circles, people. Daniel was notorious for his personal life as much as for his business acumen. Still in his 30s, his future looked limitless. He wore success like a tailored suit, captivating any room he entered. Some women found him arrogant, but many found him irresistible. Sarah first encountered Daniel during a staff conference in New York. She had been new to the company, naive, and determined to make a good impression. She hadn't expected the CEO himself to walk into the small orientation session, but there he was, greeting fresh hires as though they were future partners, not mere cogs in his expansive machine. When he shook her hand, Sarah felt an electric spark. She had never felt such instant chemistry with anyone before. In that moment, Daniel's gaze swept across her face, and a brief smile curled at his lips. Over the next few months, Sarah was astonished when Daniel began to show up at her desk. He would ask questions about her projects, her perspectives on company initiatives, and, surprisingly, her opinions on philanthropic work. While the rest of the new hires watched from a distance, Sarah and Daniel's interactions evolved from professional dialogues into personal conversations. After one especially late night at the office, he invited her to dinner. Despite the differences in their social status and the rumors swirling around the office about his elusive relationships, Sarah found it difficult to refuse. What started as occasional dinners grew into weekends together. Sarah admired Daniel's drive. He, in turn, admired her sincerity. It wasn't long before they became the subject of office gossip and discreet smiles. As the months rolled on, Daniel introduced her to penthouse parties, exclusive clubs, and his circle of influential friends, including an old Ivy League companion named Jeremy Holbrook and a prominent lawyer, Timothy Boyd. These events dazzled Sarah, though they also felt overwhelming. She never forgot her modest upbringing, never lost the feeling that she might not belong among these well-heeled elites. Still, Daniel did all in his power to welcome her into his world, and soon he proposed in grand style on a private yacht near the coast of Capri. The ring was a 3-carat diamond, flashy enough to mirror his own flamboyant persona. Sarah said yes, believing in his promise of forever. They were married in an elegant ceremony at a historic estate in upstate New York. The guest list included celebrities, CEOs, and political figures, each personally invited by Daniel. To Sarah, it felt like a dream. Within a year, she found out she was pregnant. While it had come as a mild surprise, Daniel appeared genuinely elated. They announced the news to a small group of close associates at a dinner hosted by the famous billionaire, Nolan Huxley, in Manhattan. Everyone applauded. Sarah felt she was stepping into a paradise she never knew could be hers. But the illusions of perfection can be fragile. It began with late-night phone calls. Daniel refused to explain. Then came business trips that were extended without notice. Sarah first brushed these off. He was a CEO, after all, used to unpredictable schedules. However, the tension in their home grew palpable. Gradually, Daniel's warmth waned. The dinners out, which once brimmed with romance, became silent or cancelled altogether. Sarah tried to fix the distance, planning weekends away or quiet evenings in, but she met a stony wall of excuses. One evening, after returning early from an unscheduled meeting, Sarah found Daniel speaking heatedly on the phone. He ended the call abruptly as she entered. In the seconds that followed, his face hardened, and he asked why she was home so soon. She mumbled something about an event being cancelled, but deep in her heart, she recognized that whatever she'd walked in on had been secretive and not merely related to business. That was the first time an uneasy dread clawed at her stomach. If she had known then what awaited her, she might have asked more questions and demanded real answers that night. Yet hope can be a stronger drug than logic. Sarah convinced herself that perhaps she was overreacting due to pregnancy hormones. She resolved to stand by her husband, to be supportive, and to trust him. She was determined to keep the image of her perfect marriage alive, even when the cracks in its facade began to show. As Sarah progressed in her pregnancy, the warmth she craved from Daniel was replaced by cold politeness. The tension grew to a peak one night during a formal gala at the Waldorf Astoria. Among the guests were actress Angelina Grant, real estate magnate Don Ellis, and even an old high school friend of Sarah's, a nurse named Rachel Morgan, who now resided in Manhattan. Sarah was excited for the evening, hoping it would be a chance to bond with her husband in public, reminding him that she was still the same vivacious woman he married. Throughout the event, Daniel seemed preoccupied. He left Sarah's side to hobnob with financiers and city officials. Sarah felt his avoidance like a dagger. She tried her best to mingle, but the hush-hush environment of wealth and the occasional sideways glances at her pregnant belly made her uncomfortable. It didn't help that her ankles hurt, and she felt an unsettling wave of fatigue. Unable to locate Daniel for a good half hour, she drifted into the powder room. There, she overheard two women gossiping while they reapplied lipstick. "He's always charming when he wants something," whispered one. "Poor thing doesn't know yet, does she?" "Probably not," said the other, finishing her mascara. "That's what happens when you marry into money without any idea of the skeletons in the closet." Daniel Rutherford is no saint. Their words stabbed at Sarah's heart. They were obviously talking about Daniel and his rumored infidelities, or some hidden scandal that was apparently well known among certain socialites. Her hands trembled. Was she the clueless wife they pitied? She emerged from the powder room with a forced smile, determined to brush aside the conversation as idle rumors. But her calm facade shattered when she finally found Daniel whispering to a slender brunette in an alcove near the banquet hall. Their conversation ended the instant Sarah appeared, and the woman slithered away without so much as a glance in Sarah's direction. Daniel's cheeks reddened, though his expression was impassive. "Who was that?" Sarah asked, voice strained, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "No one you need to worry about," Daniel replied curtly. "She's an investor, strictly business." "What are you doing wandering around alone?" Sarah's chest constricted in anger and hurt. "You abandoned me all night," she fired back. "I'm pregnant and tired, and you don't even notice." Daniel closed his eyes and exhaled. "Look, we'll discuss this at home," he said, guiding her back to the main event. But the fervor in his touch was gone. All that remained was a faint sense of obligation, as though Sarah were an asset he needed to keep track of for the evening's sake. The limo ride home was silent, except for the hum of New York traffic. Sarah wanted to scream, to demand Daniel explain his secret conversations, his aloofness, and the rumors. But she couldn't risk aggravating her delicate state, and Daniel's closed-off aura made it clear she wouldn't receive straightforward answers. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah felt more like a guest than a partner in her own home. She also noticed that some joint accounts, previously shared, now had restricted access. Daniel dismissed her questions by mentioning business contingencies or regulatory changes. She caught glimpses of documents on his desk mentioning emergency funds, asset liquidation, and undisclosed liabilities. Worry gnawed at her. Something was wrong beyond infidelity, beyond mere arguments. She began to suspect that Daniel was either burying a catastrophic financial problem or orchestrating something that would transform both their lives. One morning, her suspicions crystallized when an envelope was delivered to the house by a private courier. Inside, Sarah found an eviction notice with her name on it. It stated that she no longer had any legal right to reside in the property. A blank stare overtook her face. It was like reading a nightmare in black and white. She stormed into Daniel's study, the crisp letter clutched in her trembling hands. "What is this?" she demanded, tears of shock in her eyes. Daniel sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a forced air of composure about him. A framed photo of them on their wedding day was perched just behind him, a cruel reminder of better times. He removed his reading glasses slowly, looking up at her. "Sarah," he said calmly, "I'm afraid I have to take certain measures. The property is under my name, and I need you to vacate it immediately." Her heart pounded. "We're married. This is my home as much as yours, and I'm pregnant with your child, Daniel. Have you gone completely insane?" "Careful," he said, raising a hand. "I've done everything for you, paid your bills, put a roof over your head, introduced you to a higher social circle. But I've come to realize this arrangement isn't working." Sarah's mind spun. She was certain she was in a vortex of confusion and betrayal, struggling to comprehend how the man who once pledged his love could throw her out like an unwanted tenant. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel's steely gaze offered no comfort. "You don't need to understand. Our lawyers will handle the details. There's a bag of money waiting for you at Timothy Boyd's office. You'll find instructions there. I suggest you go quickly." Sarah's knees threatened to buckle. She shot back. "I won't leave. This is madness. Were a family." "Sarah," Daniel said icily, "I advise you to cooperate. Otherwise I can make this much worse. The child, I'm prepared to handle that situation as well." The threat was unspoken, but its meaning was clear. If Sarah resisted, he might fight her for custody or discredit her in a way that would crush her. The tears that streamed down her face burned hot with a mixture of heartbreak, fear, and outrage. She had no choice but to pack a few belongings, grasping onto her pride by a thread as she stepped out of the house she once thought was her safe haven. The tabloids got wind of the unfolding drama quickly. Millionaire Daniel Rutherford's pregnant wife leaves mansion. "Mysteriously," screamed the headlines. It was humiliating. Sarah found temporary refuge at a small motel on the outskirts of the city, paying in cash with the few $100s she had on hand. The rest of her funds were in accounts somehow frozen or monitored by Daniel's legal team. Helpless and alone, she spent her first night away from the mansion, crying into a pillow that smelled of cheap laundry detergent and heartbreak. The next day, she remembered her old friend from high school, Rachel Morgan, who had become a nurse in the city. Rachel and Sarah had reconnected briefly at the Waldorf Astoria Gala. Rachel was one of the few people in Manhattan who might be willing to help without prying for gossip. Struggling with morning sickness and exhaustion, Sarah took a taxi to Rachel's apartment in Harlem. When Rachel opened the door, surprise and concern flitted across her face. Sarah's appearance spoke volumes. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were swollen from tears, and the baby bump under her loose sweater told a story of a pregnant woman in distress. "Sarah?" Rachel's voice trembled in concern. "Oh my God, what happened? I read something in the tabloids, but I didn't believe." "It's all true," Sarah croaked, tears threatening to return. "Daniel kicked me out. I have nowhere else to go." Rachel opened her arms, and Sarah collapsed into them, sobbing. The next few hours were spent on Rachel's couch as Sarah recounted the nightmare. She spoke about her eviction, her suspicions, and the bizarre reference to instructions at Timothy Boyd's office. Rachel listened intently, occasionally pressing tissues into Sarah's hands. "You're staying here," Rachel declared firmly when Sarah suggested she might get another motel room. "I don't care if your husband, ex-husband, or whatever doesn't approve. We'll figure this out." With a warmth that reminded Sarah of simpler times, Rachel gave her a safe space to rest and recuperate. Over the next few days, Sarah scoured the internet, rummaging for clues as to what Daniel was up to. She discovered that certain major business transactions were swirling around Rutherford Holdings. There was talk of a shady merger, accusations of fraud from smaller investors, and hush-hush references to offshore accounts. Newspapers speculated, but no one had concrete proof. Oddly enough, Daniel's name was always insulated, never directly tarnished. "I wonder if he's trying to shield himself by cutting me loose," Sarah mused aloud one afternoon, sipping on the hot tea Rachel provided. "Like he wants to separate his personal assets from whatever's about to come crashing down." Rachel knelt beside her. "That might be it, but there could be more going on. He might be seeing someone else, or maybe—" She paused, uncertain whether to proceed. "Maybe he's threatened by the idea of an heir. Some men in those billionaire circles get paranoid about paternity and inheritance. Who knows?" Each theory stabbed Sarah's heart. She still recalled Daniel's earlier tenderness, how he'd once gently placed a hand on her belly, marveling at the life they created. Could everything have been a facade? A flicker of resolve ignited in her. "I need to talk to Timothy Boyd. He's our lawyer, or was. I need to find out what instructions Daniel left." Before she left Rachel's apartment, Sarah found a card Timothy once handed her at some corporate function. She dialed the number printed on it. He picked up on the second ring, and upon hearing her voice, he sighed. "Sarah, I was expecting your call." "Daniel told me to wait for you," he said, his tone neutral. "You need to come to my office as soon as possible." "Fine," she said. "I'll be there tomorrow." "And Timothy, I want real answers. If you're part of some scheme, I swear I'll see you tomorrow," he interrupted. Sarah hung up, heart pounding, uncertain whether she was walking into another betrayal or the lifeline she desperately needed. That night, Rachel helped Sarah gather all relevant documents. She still had wedding certificate, medical records, anything that might prove her marriage and her unborn child's legitimacy. She didn't trust Daniel's team not to twist facts. She was determined to hold on to every shred of evidence. Because while she might be pregnant, alone, and terrified, she had inherited her grandmother's steely resolve. She would not bow to the cruelty inflicted on her. Chapter 4, The Discovery Extended Version, 800 words. Sarah's taxi ride to Timothy Boyd's office was uncomfortably silent, save for the low hum of the city around her. She couldn't bear to listen to the radio. Every station seemed to be discussing the latest celebrity divorce or corporate scandal, too close to her current reality. Pressing a hand against her belly, she reminded herself to stay calm, to stay strong for both her and her unborn child. The towering skyline of Manhattan loomed outside the cab's window, a glittering reminder of Daniel's world and the power he wielded within it. By the time Sarah stepped into the lobby of the sleek, glass-fronted building overlooking Central Park. Her nerves thrummed. She glanced at the polished floors and striking modern art pieces, realizing she had been here before back when she and Daniel attended a function for high-profile clients of Boyd and Associates. Then she had walked by his side, wreathed in the glow of his success. Now she felt like an unwelcome trespasser. A stiff-faced security guard directed her to the 33rd floor, where an older receptionist, Linda Price, greeted her with a polite, if somewhat uneasy, smile. "Mr. Boyd is expecting you, Miss S." Rutherford. The woman stopped herself. "I'm sorry, Miss Campbell." The slip felt like a small dagger to Sarah's heart. She could hardly keep track of what name she should use anymore. She merely nodded in acknowledgement. There was no point correcting Linda. After all, Sarah wasn't entirely sure whether she was still legally Miss S. Rutherford or now forcibly Miss Campbell. Linda led her down a long corridor with wall-to-wall windows, giving a sweeping view of the park below. It struck Sarah how beautiful it looked, early autumn leaves, colouring the treetops in shades of amber and rust. Just a few months ago, she might have paused to take a picture, to marvel at the view. Today, she felt only the weight of apprehension pressing down on her chest. Timothy Boyd awaited her in an impressively furnished conference room. He was in his mid-50s, with hair carefully combed back and a suit tailored so impeccably that it might have come straight from a runway. Everything about him was orderly, from the stack of pristine legal pads on the table to the fountain pen placed precisely at his right-hand side. His expression, however, offered no warmth. "Sarah," he said, standing to greet her. "Please have a seat." His tone was clipped but not openly hostile, an attorney's practiced neutrality. She lowered herself onto one of the high-backed chairs, acutely aware of her rounded belly. At nearly 7 months pregnant, she felt constant fatigue and tension, made worse by the emotional storm she was living through. Across the table, Timothy eased back into his chair. A single manila folder lay before him, and her heart sank at the sight of it. It was too thin to contain anything good. "I realize this is difficult," Timothy began, folding his hands atop the folder. "Daniel has asked me to outline a proposed settlement." Sarah forced herself not to avert her gaze. "A settlement," she repeated, her words tinged with bitterness. She remembered the day Daniel had once promised her a life of shared wealth and partnership. Now he offered her a business transaction, as though their marriage was nothing but a failed merger. Clearing his throat, Timothy flipped open the folder. Yes, he wishes for an amicable dissolution. In exchange, he's prepared to offer a one-time, lump sum payment. Naturally, he also requires you to sign an NDA non-disclosure agreement, ensuring you do not reveal any details related to his personal life, his business dealings, or, in essence, your experiences with him. Sarah's stomach lurched. Each word felt like a betrayal. "And if I refuse?" she asked, setting her jaw. Timothy pressed his lips into a thin line. "He is prepared to fight you in court for custody. You should understand that he has vast resources. Lengthy litigation could be devastating emotionally and financially." She almost laughed at the sheer audacity. "So, Daniel wants me to vanish with a wad of money, sign away my right to speak, and risk losing my child if I don't comply." She trembled with anger, tears threatening to surface. This was more brutal than she had imagined, even in her worst nightmares. Timothy quietly slid a sealed envelope across the table. "These documents outline every term in detail. The figure he's offering is significant, likely enough to secure a stable future for you and the baby." He paused, hesitating. "Between us, Sarah, I'd advise you to think carefully about the child's welfare." Her gaze fell on the envelope, which suddenly seemed to pulse with an ominous weight. She pictured the settlement check inside, likely 7 figures, maybe more. Once upon a time, such money would have been beyond her wildest dreams, yet now it felt like blood money. Rage simmered beneath her shock. She gripped the table's edge to keep herself steady and remind herself not to lash out irrationally. "You tell Daniel," she said, voice trembling, "that I will never sign this. He can threaten me all he wants, but I'm not signing away my dignity. Or my child's." Timothy gave a resigned sigh. "He won't like that, Sarah. I'm merely the messenger, but I've seen how these situations escalate. Be prepared." She said nothing more. Standing, she left the documents on the table, ignoring Timothy's parting words. Linda tried to offer her a polite goodbye in the reception area, but Sarah hurried past, determined not to show her tears until she was away from prying eyes. The elevator ride down felt interminable. Everything around her, the glinting panels, the faint smell of cologne, the perfect stillness, seemed like part of Daniel's realm, where appearances were paramount and truth was often buried. By the time the doors slid open into the lobby, she had steeled herself with fresh resolve. She would not be cornered into silence. Outside, the autumn breeze hit her cheeks, bracing and real. The paparazzi had arrived, 2 or 3 of them snapping photos, shouting questions about the imploding Rutherford marriage. She turned away, her heart pounding, desperate to escape their invasive glares. Hailing a taxi proved challenging, but finally she slipped into the back seat, gave Rachel's address, and exhaled a shaky breath. At least in the car, she had a moment's reprieve from the cameras. Yet her determination only grew stronger. Each time she recalled Daniel's ultimatum and the potential for him to seize custody of her baby, she felt fresh indignation. She hadn't come this far just to be silenced. After all, if Daniel was so desperate to keep her quiet, what was he trying so hard to conceal? Once back at Rachel's small apartment, she found solace in the simple furnishings. The aroma of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchenette, and the comforting sight of her old friend standing by the window, concern etched on her face. It was a far cry from the mansion she had once called home, but it was real. More real, perhaps, than anything she had shared with Daniel in those last tumultuous months. That night, after recounting the day's events to Rachel, Sarah made a call she had been hesitant to place. James Harrison, an investigative journalist she'd crossed paths with at a charity function, answered on the third ring. Though they were not close friends, he had shown genuine kindness and curiosity in their brief interactions. If anyone could help her dig deeper into Rutherford Holdings, it was James. And if Daniel had gone to such lengths to muzzle her, the truth lurking beneath his empire had to be enormous. When James agreed to meet, Sarah felt her pulse quicken. There was fear, yes, but also a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel might have thrown her out, threatened her finances, and tried to buy her silence. But he had severely misjudged her resolve. She was no longer the timid wife enthralled by wealth and glamour. She was a mother determined to safeguard her child's future, and now she was ready to uncover the secrets that Daniel Rutherford would stop at nothing to hide. At James Harrison's cramped but industrious office in Midtown, Sarah laid out everything she knew, the suspicious documents she glimpsed at the mansion, the restricted bank accounts, the hush-hush investor gossip, and Daniel's sudden push to sever ties with her through an NDA. James listened attentively, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Occasionally, he'd tap away on his laptop, cross-referencing Sarah's accounts with publicly available filings related to Rutherford Holdings. "This lines up with rumors I've heard," he said, scanning a newly uncovered article. Daniel's been consolidating assets under shell companies. Some people believe he's funneling money offshore to avoid certain investigations. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of investigations? James leaned back in his chair. Federal. There have been allegations of insider trading and potential fraudulent claims about the company's finances. Nothing concrete, but where there's smoke, there's usually fire. If Daniel's trying to distance himself from you right now, he might be ensuring you can't be used as a witness against him. Sarah swallowed hard. recalling the legal documents referencing the NDA. So he wants to silence me before investigators ask questions. James nodded gravely. If he's indicted, or even under serious scrutiny, a spouse could be compelled to testify. But if you're no longer considered a spouse, or if you sign an NDA, that changes the dynamic. The realization crashed over Sarah like icy water. Daniel's betrayal was about self-preservation. It wasn't just about a new lover or a whim, it was about saving his empire by cutting out any liability, including his pregnant wife. "James," she said, her voice steely, "I'll help you find the proof. We need to make sure the authorities learn the truth about Daniel." He offered a cautious smile. "All right, we proceed carefully. I'll contact a few sources. In the meantime, you should keep a low profile and don't sign anything." Later that afternoon, James escorted Sarah to a small cafe near the office, away from prying paparazzi. While sipping ginger tea, she confided more personal details. How she still felt an emotional pull. How she once loved Daniel deeply. She hated herself for still harboring those feelings. James gently reassured her that heartbreak was normal, even when the cause was monstrous. Over the following weeks, Sarah played detective. Together with Rachel's help and James's investigative prowess, she dug up old correspondences, cross-checked suspicious company memos, and reached out to disgruntled ex-employees. A few of them, like a former accountant named Clara Mendez, hinted that Rutherford Holdings had manipulated financial statements to attract high-profile investors. Clara, however, was too frightened to go on record. The fear of Daniel's retaliation was as potent as it was real. In the meantime, Daniel's lawyers bombarded Sarah with calls and emails, demanding she come in for depositions or sign the settlement. She ignored them, focusing on her new mission. Yet each unanswered call heightened her anxiety. She was nearly 7 months pregnant, with limited financial resources, relying on Rachel's goodwill to keep a roof over her head. Every day, she dreaded some new legal trap or emotional blow from Daniel. Then, in a twist of fate, Sarah received a discreet tip, an unsigned note slipped under Rachel's apartment door. It read, "Look into Sphere Investments. Your husband's house of cards will fall." At first, she thought it was a prank, but she passed the note to James. He immediately recognized the name. "I've heard whispers about Sphere," he said, lips pressed tight. "It's rumored to be a shell corporation linked to major money laundering for big players in the finance world. If Rutherford Holdings is tied to it, that's huge." That same day, James discovered that Sphere Investments had purchased substantial shares in Rutherford Holdings just 2 months before Daniel served Sarah with the eviction. The transaction was buried in a complex web of shell entities. If proven, it would implicate Daniel in a massive fraud scheme. "This must be why he's so determined to cut you off," James concluded, eyes gleaming with the excitement of a journalist on the brink of a major scoop. "If you blow this open, he could face criminal charges." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Then we have to blow it open." Stepping out of James's office, she recognized how her life had changed. She was no longer the timid wife overshadowed by her millionaire husband. She was a woman on a mission not merely to survive, but to protect her unborn child and ensure that Daniel faced justice. The prospect terrified and exhilarated her. In the back of her mind, she remembered her grandmother's words, "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. Sometimes you just have to stand up and fight." As if to confirm their darkest suspicions, Daniel launched a public relations offensive. News outlets sympathetic to him published stories painting Sarah as an opportunist who had tried to trap Daniel with a pregnancy, then attempted to extort money from him. Reading these articles felt like a knife in Sarah's chest. She recognized the cunning hand of Daniel's spin doctors. With enough repetition, the public might come to believe she was the villain in his story. Despite the emotional toll, Sarah pushed on. James prepared a preliminary expose for Financial Pulse. It was a meticulously detailed piece that mapped out the labyrinth of offshore accounts, the hidden ties to Sphere Investments, and how Rutherford Holdings used inflated numbers to secure massive loans. The article also hinted at potential bribery in foreign markets, though that portion was still under investigation. "We can't publish until we have irrefutable evidence," James cautioned. "Right now we have documents, but they're not definitively tied to Daniel's personal actions. Sphere is a spider's web, and we need the spider." Sarah's phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls from unknown numbers. "On a hunch?" she answered one. The voice on the other end was female, trembling with urgency. "Miss S. Campbell?" The woman paused. "My name is Elaine Grant. I used to be Daniel's administrative assistant. I can't talk long. I heard what you're doing, and I think I can help." Sarah's pulse raced. "Elaine, if you have any proof, I do, but I'm terrified. Daniel fired me when I started asking too many questions about wire transfers. But before I left, I took screenshots of some key documents. Meet me tomorrow at noon, Washington Square Park Fountain. Please come alone." Before Sarah could respond, the line clicked dead. This was the break she needed, assuming it wasn't a trap. She immediately informed James, who insisted she not go alone. Ultimately, they agreed that Sarah would go, but James would remain nearby, disguised among the crowd, ready to step in if anything suspicious occurred. The next day, the sky was overcast, threatening rain. Sarah sat on a bench near the iconic fountain, her pregnant belly now quite prominent beneath her jacket. Anxiety churned her stomach. After 20 minutes, a slim woman in dark sunglasses and a hooded coat approached. She sat beside Sarah, her posture tense. "You came," Elaine whispered. She slipped a small USB drive into Sarah's coat pocket. "That has everything. Bank records, email chains with Daniel's digital signature. Everything is there if you can decode it. The files are password protected. The password is Eleanor. That was my mother's name." Sarah offered a grateful nod. "Thank you. Why are you doing this?" Elaine's shoulders shook slightly. "I was loyal to Daniel, but after I realized the extent of his dealings, how many lives he was ruining, I couldn't live with it. And when I heard how he was treating you, a pregnant woman, I knew I couldn't stay silent." Rain droplets began to fall. Elaine stood abruptly. "I must go. Be careful. Daniel has eyes everywhere." Within seconds, she disappeared into the crowd. Sarah spotted James leaning against a distant tree, phone in hand. She patted her coat pocket, her heart pounding with hope. Maybe this was the key to proving Daniel's direct involvement, not just some circumstantial link. Back at James's office, they immediately accessed the USB drive. The password worked, revealing a trove of PDFs, spreadsheets, and email correspondences. Among them were direct instructions from Daniel Rutherford himself to funnel money through Sphere Investments and manipulate the corporate books. One email read, "Make sure these funds are transferred offshore ASAP. No mistakes. If Sarah ever sees these, we're finished. DR." Sarah's throat constricted reading Daniel's casual mention of her name. The final line hammered home the truth. He'd evicted her and demanded an NDA to ensure she never discovered these incriminating transactions. James's eyes shone. "This is it, Sarah. This is proof that Daniel orchestrated the fraud." Shock and triumph warred within her. She thought of the baby growing inside her and the horrifying knowledge that if she hadn't uncovered this, Daniel might have taken everything from them, leaving them penniless while he continued to operate above the law. They spent the next few days meticulously organizing the evidence. James also contacted an old mentor at the New York City District Attorney's office to set up a confidential meeting. By the time Sarah got home to Rachel's apartment each night, she was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Still, she pressed a hand to her abdomen, murmuring words of reassurance to the child who would soon enter this chaotic world. She vowed to stand strong, to see this through, no matter the cost. On a crisp morning, Sarah and James found themselves in a private meeting room at the district attorney's office. Assistant to Caroline Park was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, known for her tenacity against high-profile criminals. She listened as they laid out the case, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the blatant forging of financial statements, and, finally, Daniel's orchestrated plan to isolate Sarah. Caroline's gaze was intense. "This is explosive," she said, tapping the USB drive. "We can pursue charges if we verify these documents. My team will launch a formal investigation, but be warned, this will be a high-stakes case." Daniel Rutherford has friends in powerful places. Sarah squared her shoulders. "I have a child to protect. I'll do whatever it takes." Leaving the DA's office felt surreal. Sarah found herself trembling, not just from fear, but from the weight of what she had set in motion. She had effectively declared war on her estranged husband. In the coming days, she gave a confidential deposition to the federal investigators. She told them everything: how Daniel had coerced her, threatened her with custody battles, and orchestrated the eviction. James's article was postponed pending the official inquiry, ensuring that Daniel wouldn't have time to destroy evidence or bribe his way out. A week passed with no visible reaction from Daniel, which only increased Sarah's sense of impending doom. Then, early one morning, a barrage of texts and calls flooded her phone. One was from Rachel. "OMG. Sarah, turn on the news now." She scrambled for the remote in Rachel's living room. The screen lit up with an image of Daniel Rutherford being escorted by men in suits, federal agents, out of his midtown office. Headline after headline flashed: Daniel Rutherford arrested in massive fraud investigation, FBI raids Rutherford Holdings, and offshore scandal exposed. Sarah stared, heart pounding. The unstoppable tycoon now looked humbled, face tense as cameras snapped from all angles. James called moments later, his voice filled with excitement and concern. "They've taken him in for questioning." The DA's office must have found enough evidence to proceed. "This is happening, Sarah." Emotions overwhelmed her: vindication, sadness, and, oddly enough, a pang of sorrow for the man she once loved. But that sorrow was dwarfed by the relief that justice might finally be served. In the aftermath of Daniel's arrest, Sarah braced for the attacks from his defense team. Within days, a statement was released claiming Daniel was wrongly accused and that a disgruntled ex-wife had fabricated evidence. His lawyers portrayed him as a brilliant businessman targeted by jealous rivals. But the authorities moved swiftly. More evidence emerged from Rutherford Holdings employees emboldened by Daniel's arrest. Elaine Grant's documents were just the tip of the iceberg. A wave of whistleblowers followed, each contributing damning pieces to the puzzle: manipulated financial reports, bribes to foreign officials, and money laundering schemes of staggering scope. Amid the chaos, Sarah received an unexpected call: Daniel. Despite everything, she accepted the collect call from the detention center. His voice sounded worn, a shadow of his once confident tone. "Sarah," he said softly, "I don't know why you did this, but—" She clenched her jaw. "You gave me no choice, Daniel. You tried to destroy me, to keep me silent." He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I never wanted it to get this far. I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people. I panicked. This child, you don't understand." She felt tears prick her eyes, but steeled herself. "You're right. I don't understand how you could betray your own family." His voice cracked. "Look, for the sake of our child, maybe we can negotiate." If you help me show that I was coerced by associates, she cut him off, fury burning anew. Coerced? Your own emails prove you orchestrated the fraud. Daniel, this was your empire. You built it from the ground up and molded it in your image. You threatened to take my baby if I spoke out. Now you want me to save you? Silence answered her. She ended the call. Over the next few weeks, Sarah stepped into a new role. She worked with Caroline Park to clarify any lingering details, offering her full cooperation. She also prepared for the imminent arrival of her baby, using the modest financial resources still available from her personal savings before Daniel's legal siege began. James, ever the supportive friend, offered to help with baby essentials. Rachel insisted Sarah move in permanently until she could find a more stable place. News outlets shifted their narrative. Sarah was no longer painted as the greedy gold digger. She was the pregnant whistleblower whose bravery had helped expose one of the biggest financial scandals of the decade. Offers for interviews flooded her inbox, but she stayed selective, not wishing to overshadow the criminal case or jeopardize the safety of her unborn child. Then, one night, just as Sarah was winding down with a cup of chamomile tea, she felt her first contraction. The baby was coming a week earlier than expected. Rachel rushed her to the hospital, where Sarah spent 7 intense hours in labor. Finally, at dawn, a new life entered the world, a baby girl whom Sarah named Hope Elizabeth Campbell. Exhausted but triumphant, Sarah cradled her daughter, tears of joy mingling with tears of relief. She had feared Daniel's shadow would eclipse this moment, but in that hospital room, she felt only love and freedom. She promised Hope that she would give her a life filled with honesty and warmth, far from the manipulations of wealth and corruption. Several weeks after Hope's birth, Sarah was summoned to the courthouse to give formal testimony in Daniel's trial. Armed with Elaine Grant's documents and James Harrison's investigative research, the prosecution built a formidable case. The secret Sarah wielded those incriminating files that Daniel had so desperately tried to bury became the linchpin of the trial. The media called it the betrayal that brought down a titan, referencing how Daniel's pregnant wife had emerged as the unexpected whistleblower. Indeed, the secret that ruined him was not just the evidence of fraud, but the knowledge that Sarah, once his greatest supporter, was the one who revealed every detail to the authorities. As the trial concluded, Daniel was found guilty on multiple counts: securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He faced a lengthy prison sentence with the possibility of parole in over a decade. His defense team's attempts to discredit Sarah fell flat in the face of overwhelming documentation, eyewitness accounts, and the paper trail linking Daniel directly to illegal transactions. On the day sentencing was announced, Sarah sat in the gallery, Hope gurgling softly in her arms. The judge delivered a scathing rebuke of Daniel's actions, condemning his exploitation of the financial system. Cameras flashed, spectators whispered. Daniel, once the polished millionaire, stood shackled in a plain suit, his life and empire in shambles. Their eyes met briefly as he was led out of the courtroom. Regret, shame, maybe even a flicker of sorrow crossed his features. Sarah felt a pang of sadness for the love story that had died, but she also felt an immense surge of relief and resolve. She whispered to Hope, "We're free now," pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. In the aftermath, many of Daniel's assets were seized or liquidated. A portion of the recovered money was allocated as restitution to victims and smaller investors. Some portion, as determined by the court, was set aside for child support, legally ensuring that Daniel's child would have resources even if he was behind bars. While Sarah could never fully separate herself from Daniel's legacy, Hope would always carry some part of him. She embraced the future with renewed optimism. 6 months later, Sarah leaned on the railing of a modest balcony in Queens, watching Hope laugh at the shapes in the clouds. The city stretched out before them, not as an intimidating skyline, but as a realm of possibilities. She had secured a position at a mid-level investment firm, ironically applying her business acumen to more ethical ventures. Slowly, she was rebuilding her life on her own terms. Rachel visited often, doting on her goddaughter, while James had become a steady presence, not just as a journalist, but as a friend, someone who recognized Sarah's strength and admired her resolve. There was talk of a follow-up article about whistleblowers in the finance industry, featuring Sarah's story as a beacon for others trapped in abusive power dynamics. Occasionally, Sarah recalled the grandeur of the mansion, the opulent galas, and the illusions of a perfect marriage. Yet those memories no longer haunted her. They had transformed into cautionary tales, reminding her of how quickly wealth and power could corrupt. She was no longer Daniel Rutherford's wife, nor the naive young employee overshadowed by a corporate giant. She was simply Sarah Campbell's single mother, survivor, and architect of her own future. Thus ended the storm Daniel unleashed, quelled by the unwavering determination of a pregnant woman he foolishly discarded. In trying to bury her, he had only planted the seeds of his own downfall. And if Sarah learned anything from the ordeal, it was that sometimes even a miracle grows from the darkest soil. Thank you for accompanying Sarah Campbell on her gripping journey from a trusting wife living under the shadow of her millionaire husband to a courageous whistleblower who brought his empire crashing down. Through heartbreak and betrayal, she found her inner strength and rose above every obstacle to protect her unborn child and reveal the secrets Daniel Rutherford worked so hard to hide. Her story reminds us that hope can indeed triumph over corruption, and that one person's bravery can alter the course of many lives. If this powerful story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Every click shows us you value stories of resilience and justice. Let's spread the message that, no matter the odds, standing up for what's right is always possible. Your support makes all the difference together. We'll continue to bring you more incredible, real-life drama fiction.